Hi guys, I have another layout using the Best Day of My Life kit, and this one is going to feature the offcut from that shape that I used from the Silhouette store. It's called the Circle Frame Collage, and I used it on my last layout, which was called Shootin' Some B-Ball outside of the school. So I'm going to be scrapbooking this picture of the Apple store in New York City from our trip in, I guess it was exactly a year ago that we took this trip. And so I'm going to start by misting this beautiful wood veneer. I'm going to start by trying to use the Skyscraper Mr. Huey's that came in a Studio Calico kit a year or more ago. Well, yes, it definitely would have been a year ago, more than a year ago, because I haven't received the kits in longer than that. Anyhow, I could not for the life of me get the little mist thing going, the little spray nozzle, and so I went upstairs and I cleaned it out with warm water, and that usually works, but this one just isn't going to spray for me. So luckily I have this tumble dye which is also black, and so I decided to use that instead, and it sprays quite nicely, so I am going to use that. Basically what I want to do here is make this skyline, kind of like the cityscape wood veneer, look like a night skyline, kind of like the silhouette, kind of like at the beginning of Frasier. Love skylines. So you'll notice that when you mist these wood veneers, especially the really long ones that are thin, they do tend to curl up, and that is okay. It just kind of curls up. You need to be very gentle with these ones because they're extremely thin, but it's okay if it curls up. It does flatten out as it dries, and so that's why I used my heat gun, just to speed up the drying process a little bit. I looked in my stash of vellum for a piece of vellum to back this on, and I didn't have a piece big enough in my stash, so I had to go and open a new package of vellum, which I just bought at the art store yesterday. And I'm going to put away my cake box that I use for misting and wash up my hands so that I don't get black ink on anything that I'm going to touch after this. And I'm going to back this piece of wood veneer onto a piece of vellum. So I'm running my glue runner. It's just a mono adhesive tape runner. I could have used my ATG for this, and I want to attach it, and you'll see that when I did that there is this webbing in the windows of the buildings, and so I slowed this down a little tiny bit so that you could see what I'm doing here is I'm just rubbing the back, and I'm not sure if I'm going to turn it around to show you exactly what I'm doing, but I'm just rubbing the back until the webbing of the glue is moved so that it's not showing through any of those windows anymore. I'm just going to take my time and work my way through all of the windows. I didn't put adhesive over the whole thing, so it's only in the places where the adhesive is. Now if I had used, the reason I used that adhesive, that Tombow, is that I thought I had a Tombow glue runner that used the little dots. The dots are great for this kind of a thing because the dots only stick to the surface that they touch. So if I had used one of the dot runners, it would have not stuck in the holes of the window. So that would have been ideal, but I guess this one wasn't a dot runner after all, and so I had to do that. So we're back up to this regular speed now, which is faster, which is, I think I use 4 times the speed for most of my videos. And I'm just cutting around the cityscape here, so I'm a little bit out of frame, but what I'm doing is I'm just kind of pulling the vellum out a little bit as I cut, just so that I can get it so that the vellum is just a tiny bit smaller than the wood veneer itself, and that way I don't have any little bits of vellum showing on the edges of my buildings. Sorry, I know I'm kind of really close up and moving around a lot, and I know that this is not, I realize as I'm watching it now that this is not a very pleasant viewing experience, so sorry about that. It's only a tiny bit longer though. So yeah, and I'm just kind of peeling back and trimming it as I can, and I want to make sure that all of the windows are filled with vellum, but that none of the vellum is hanging over to the other side. and the reason I'm backing it with vellum is just so that it looks like the windows have glass in them. Because at this point, I wasn't sure what I was going to layer this piece over, and if I layered it over pattern paper, I didn't want the pattern paper showing in the windows. I wanted the windows to look like glass. So there's a close-up of what the final product looks like, and so that makes a really cute embellishment for a layout, I think. And where it's black, it has quite a lot of impact. So I'm using this piece of craft paper, which was basically the offcuts from my last layout that I created, and I'm going to piece it together so that I'm using that shape again, but this time I'm using the negative image of that shape. So I had to piece together all of those little circles inside of the other circles, and at this point I'm not entirely sure that I like how this is going. I definitely want to use the pink with it's a piece of paper from Echo Park from the Capture Life collection, and has little tiny scrolly letters that say life is beautiful, and so I really want to use that. And I have the rest of the kit here, and I'm looking at what other pieces of pattern paper I might want to put on this layout, but none of them are really, basically I really like this paper here, that chevron with the multicolored, but it's a little bit too colorful. Like, I'm kind of feeling like, because I'm going with a black and white theme, that I'd like to stick to only one other color, and so that will be pink. And so I'm not ultimately going to use that chevron, but I did notice that this chevron is a black and white version of almost the same one. So I'm going to cut a similar size piece of this. This chevron is smaller, so it's got two chevrons in the similar kind of size piece of paper, and then it occurs to me I think I'd like to cut those chevrons apart, so I'll do that. Trim them down so there's not quite so much white showing, and then I'm going to make them go in two different directions instead of in the same direction. That adds a lot of dynamic energy to a page, I find, putting chevrons in opposite directions. It kind of, I don't know, I just really like that look. So now I'm feeling like this whole thing is looking a little bland. So I'm going to frame out the whole piece of craft paper with a piece of pink cardstock, and that will just kind of provide even more of a pop of the pink on this layout, and it'll frame it all in and make it look a little bit less like things are slipping off the page. That's what I find a frame does, is it kind of makes things look more intentionally placed instead of, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. So now I'm going to go ahead and attach all of these pieces together. I couldn't find my scissors, so I'm just going to tear the paper, and what I'm not realizing here is that I'm putting this on the wrong side of the craft paper. I really want this layout to have the photo over to the right side and those two little dots over to the left side, and so look, I'm kind of figuring that out now. Oh, wait a minute, I did it on the wrong side. But never fear, because the ATG, one of the reasons that I love it so much is that you can peel it right off. So I zoomed in a little bit so you could see how I did that. You just rub your finger on it and it goes into a little ball of glue, and then you can just pick it off. As long as you haven't waited too long for the glue to set or pushed on it too hard. If you burnish it with like a bone folder or whatever, then it would probably be a lot better adhered and you'd have a harder time with that. So I filled the other two little spaces over to the side too. Those were punches I did on a completely different layout, and I didn't want to cut into a new piece of craft cardstock. I do have some in my stash, but I figured I would rather use up this one. And so when I cut the silhouette cut, I just put it over to the side, and I thought when I do another layout using the offcuts, because when I cut this shape I kind of already had the idea that I would use it for two different layouts, the same cut, and so I thought I'll maybe put something over in the corner or something to cover up those two little dots. And so here I'm just filling them in case I don't cover them over, and I end up only covering one of them. So I did take this to my sewing machine, which my small sewing machine doesn't seem to work for me anymore, and so I had to bring it over to my big sewing machine. You'll notice that my sewing is not perfect. There are a couple of sharp corners on my circles, and I find that the more I sew circles, the better I get at sewing circles. And so, this is one of those things that I used to really avoid sewing circles. And so I'm trying to just get better at it. And the only way to do that is to just do it. And so this is me getting better at doing circles. You have to be bad at something for a little while. You have to be willing to be bad at something for a little while in order to increase your skills in anything, right? So I'm using my Martha Stewart, no, it's my Stampin' Up! Bone folder just to get under the edges of this paper. I have gotten some paper cuts by doing this with my fingers, so I'm trying to use tools for these kinds of things instead so that I don't cut up my fingers. Not that my fingers look all that great. I've got a really old nail polish. One of my clients painted my nails for me, and I haven't wanted to take it off even though it's really beaten up. I have to just remove it today, I think. So yeah, I'm just, taking my time to pull up all of the edges, and it takes a little bit of time to soften the fibers of paper, and if you just kind of work at it and fold it and roll it, and it gets softer and softer, and then it stays standing up a little bit better, and it just looks a little bit more kind of tattered, or whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to stagger these two chevrons a little bit so that they don't look quite so lined up, and I'm putting my city skyline down there. Here I'm kind of trying to think, it's so dark and it's such a heavy element, I really want that skyline on the bottom, and I'm not sure I love the idea of kind of like two competing elements here, like the photo is in the middle and then there's this big gap and then the skyline is on the bottom. So what I've decided to do here is make a bit of a circular layout where the circle kind of begins over to the left of the photo, works its way around those circles down along the skyline from left to right, from right to left, and then finishes over with the bow. And then I'm going to put some journaling to kind of finish off that circle on the left hand side. And so the journaling is going to go at the very, very end and finish off the circle. This is a very unusual layout for me anyways, and I haven't seen this kind of a circle shape layout before. I'm probably not the first person to do it, but it was something that I don't know, it was an unusual idea, and I thought this is one way to use this photo and this cityscape wood veneer, which I really wanted to use, and hopefully have a bit of kind of like a theoretical design idea behind it instead of slapping them on the page willy-nilly. So I pulled out, so I had only one piece of flare left from this kit. No, I had two. But I had decided that actually I think that the pin one is from the Project Life, like from the This Life Noted kit for pocket scrapbooking, and so it was too heavy. It was competing with the other elements on the page, so I pulled out an old, these are all Ormolu flare from kits, only the City Skyline one is from this kit. The other, I think the yellow arrow is from the This Life Noted kit, and then the ampersand is from some other previous kit. So I'm just using my punch because it seemed a little bit like those flare were floating in the middles of the circles. So I'm using another piece of Capture Life paper from the kit. I'm just cutting a chunk out of this one so that it kind of follows the line of the craft circle that it's matted on, and it seems to kind of anchor these. I thought about putting another little pink circle in the middle of that other one, but it's too much, so I decided not to. So those little pink punched circles, and I used a 1.5 inch punch for that. The 1 inch punch was too small. They just kind of ground those flare badges that are, as I think I mentioned, that they're all from various kits. And it grounds them and makes them look a little bit less like they're just floating randomly in the middles of the circles. I'm gluing down some of the elements now, and I'm just going to check and make sure that I put that first chevron on straight. Couldn't find my ruler. My desk is an absolute mess right now, so I couldn't find my ruler, so I had to go grab another one. And I did use some foam adhesive for the back of this photo so that it's sitting up off the layout a little bit. That will allow my Explore die cut that came in the kit, which is going to be part of the title eventually. At this point, I don't know what I'm doing with the title. That's going to create a nice little shadow. So I am pulling up the edges of the punched circles of paper, and that is a different pattern than the background pattern that's below the circles. Just for a little bit of extra interest, I didn't want to use exactly the same pattern. I'm just gluing them down. I could have sewed around them, but I think it would have gotten too tight, and then you're not going to see most of the sewing anyways because the flare badges are going over top. So I'm putting the city skyline so that it overlaps with some of those circles, so that I've got, at this point, I've got kind of like almost a half circle. I guess it's a little bit more than a half circle. It's an incompleted circle design here. And I'm using my centering ruler because I kind of forgot how to use it there for a minute there. I haven't used it in a long time, because it allows me to make similar spaces between my lines, because it has all these lines on it and it's see-through, so you can just kind of decide where you want your spacing to go and then just keep moving your ruler down and down and down. I'm actually going to leave the pencil lines on this layout. I'm not going to erase them because they provide just a teensy bit more weight to my journaling, and where my journaling is part of the design of this layout, it finishes off that circle and closes it off. I don't know. I just didn't want to erase them. In fact, I almost feel like going back and making those. I'm just checking to make sure that it is actually on Fifth Avenue. I knew that was Fifth Avenue, but I didn't know if the address was Fifth Avenue because it's on a corner, I think. Yeah, so I forget what I was saying. Oh yeah, I'm tempted to go back and put some like marker lines underneath of the journaling, just to kind of like basically going over the pencil lines but with marker, so that it becomes an even stronger element. I don't know, I'll wait on that. I've already taken the photos of the layout, but I might, you'll see when I do my out with the old kit, my out with the old video, whether I've gone ahead and done that or not. So my final touch is to put this crepe paper bow that came in the kit. I'm going to put it down here in the corner. And now I'm thinking about what am I going to do about this title. So I thought at first that the title would be Explore the Apple Store. So I'm going to, I knew I did not, oh, and I'm going to touch that off with a enamel dot and another enamel dot right there, kind of like a tone on tone type of look, because I don't want to detract from the overall kind of shape of this layout. So I already checked the small glitter font from Heidi Swapp that comes in this kit, and there weren't enough letters for me to spell out Apple Store, and so I'm going to have a look at some other letter stickers. I'd love to make Apple be this really nice October afternoon scripted font, but I don't have it in black, and I'm really wanting to go with a kind of like a monochromatic, just pink and black look to this layout. Of course, there's also craft on it, and there's a tiny bit of yellow and a tiny bit of blue, but it's mostly just black and white and pink. So I'm using these Amy Tangerine. These are Layered Goodness, I think it's called. Yeah, Layered Goodness letter stickers, and they're transparent, but they're bold enough that they make a nice impact. I like that they're skinny because they're not going to take up too much space, because the title is actually going to layer onto my photo, and I don't want to take away from the photo too much because it's kind of a cool photo. And now I'm looking for a font to use the word "the" with, so sorry that I forgot to zoom out for this. I just grabbed the packaging for that so I could remember what the name of that font was called. And I thought about using these Jelly Bean Soup letter stickers, but then these Lily Bean ones are almost exactly like the bigger ones that I have, but just a smaller font. They're also paper instead of transparent, so they're a little bit different, just showing you the label there. But I think they do a nice job of mirroring the Amy Tangerine font that I'm already using, but being smaller. So here's where I'm going to make a mistake, in that I'm starting with the E and working backwards, which normally I do, but it's going to make my A land right in that heavy line that's on the photo, and it's going to decrease the readability just a little bit. You can still read it, but I would have preferred for the word apple to be shifted over just a teensy little bit. See? And I thought about, can I get these off? But no, I knew I couldn't, because when you put letter stickers on a photo, it's pretty much you've got one shot to do it, and that's about it. So even though that H is a little bit crooked, I'm going to leave it. And so I am being careful. That's why you see me kind of like moving this photo all around to try to use different landmarks to line up my letters. So right there I lined up the E with the edge of the photo, with the when the photo's right side up, it would be the right edge of that photo. And now I'm lining up these letters with each other and with the letters above it. And so I find that just shifting my layout around a little bit helps me use various landmarks for getting my title. It's not completely straight, but I knew it wouldn't be because of the fact that I was laying them onto a photo instead of onto paper. Just less forgiving. Then I decided Explore the Apple Store feels a little unfinished, so I decided to put let's, but I don't have an E, so I'm going to use an F instead of an E. Oops, sorry about that. So there's the F, and then I'm going to cut the Z. Z is always the letter that I sacrifice because I don't often use Z's or Z's if you're not Canadian. So there you go. You can almost not even tell that that was an F. So there you go, you'll see some close-ups next, and this one was a really different one for me, but I quite like how it turned out. I always like to have a slightly different layout every once in a while in my scrapbook, and it keeps things fresh, and it also gives me a chance to try something new that sometimes I adopt it into my kind of style of scrapbooking, and other times it's more of a one-shot type of a deal. But I do really like how this one turned out. And yeah, I especially love the sewing, and it's always hard to sew on circles, so you have to be willing to accept some imperfections there. I hope you guys all have a great scrappy week, and I will see you on the next one.